Welcome everyone to the Small School Districts event. And first of all, my name is Glen Senestraro. I'm the superintendent at Fortuna High School District. We are located about 15 miles south of Eureka, California. We are also a part of the ACSA Region 1. So today's format is basically going to be, I have some planned questions that I'm going to ask our panelists. They're going to introduce themselves shortly. And then we will be followed by an open mic, a Q&A towards the later part of the hour. Thank you to ACSA Member Services, Marjorie and her team, as well as the ACSA IT group with Josh here with us. Our partner for this event is Keenan, which we'll be hearing from later. Kyle McKibben is here from Keenan. And he will be getting a spot a little bit later. I'll be referring back to you, Kyle. And so what we're going to work on is we're going to go right to our panelists, and they're going to introduce themselves. I believe that Margie has put in the chat, if you could just put your name and what your title is and where what your district is, so we can get that information. So we will start off with Kevin. If you could introduce yourself, it'd be great.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Kevin Kurtz. I'm the superintendent principal at North Cow Creek Elementary School. We are located in Palo Cedro, just outside of Redding, Northern California. And North Cow Creek is we have about 240 students, K-8, here at the school. I've been superintendent principal for the last 6 years and have also worked throughout the state as an administrator in other schools and districts. North Cow Creek is currently in seat with all of our students. We did start off the year hybrid, and then after about a month and a half, we're able to move to in seat with our students.
Great, thank you, Kevin. Appreciate that. Next up, we have Melanie. Melanie, if you could introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Melanie Matta, Superintendent Principal at Hope Elementary School in Porterville, California. We're located in Tulare County, ACSA Region 11. We are currently hybrid instruction. We have in-person in the morning from about 8 to 11, and then we finish up in the afternoon, continuing with Zoom in the afternoon. It's great to be here with everybody and ask us any questions that you want. We're open books today.
And I think it's noted that that is not a screensaver behind her. That is actually her home right behind her. So.
Oh, I forgot to mention I have 240 students in TK through 8th grade.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Mary?
Yes, hi, I'm Dr. Mary McNeil, and I'm the superintendent in my 8th year here in the Needles Unified School District. Needles is located in 6,000 square miles on the California, Arizona, Nevada border of San Bernardino County, which is ACSA Region 12, yay. I'm also the chair of the ACSA Small School District Committee, and my school district is in a hybrid model with in-person TK through 5th grade. And at secondary, we have brought back our special education students in small cohorts, as well as some of our seniors that are struggling to graduate. So we have started the year in distance learning, then we moved to hybrid and on elementary waivers. And then we are back in distance learning and we'll reopen on our waivers when we come back from winter break.
Great, thank you, Mary. And I forgot to mention that we're just a high school district up here in Fortuna. We've actually been back to in-person since August 10th. And so in Humboldt County, we were lucky enough that we were in the lowest tier for most of it until probably about 2 weeks ago. But we have maintained being able to offer in-person classes, and we are a school district of about 1,100 students, and we're just 9 through 12. So I would just say another thing too is if you guys are having a hard time hearing or things are happening, if you could just put something in the chat if possible, and then we might be able to fix any issues you may be having and stuff. So I think we're just going to dive right in and start some of our questions. And this first question is going to be to Kevin. Kevin, in thinking about your first week of school, what helped your reopening go well? And if you could mention maybe 2 or 3 studies that you think would worked and what you might recommend to others.
Excellent. Probably the first thing, and we had a really good first week of school. We did start off hybrid, The nice part about hybrid is that with half of our kids, we were able to almost practice and train kids in all of the procedures that we had put in place as far as hand washing, recess procedures, social distancing, lunch, and that was really nice. We did, one of the benefits in Shasta County, several districts worked off of a school reopening plan. And that plan detailed just about everything from how parents needed to drop off and pick up their students, the hand washing, temperature checks that were out front as students came in. And we really tried to streamline as much as possible that would minimize classroom distractions. So that reopening plan really was instrumental in us having that successful first week. Parents had input into that plan, classified, certificated, and board members as well. Secondly, I think our school, we put kids into cohorts. We had 3 classes per cohort, and we redesigned our daily schedule where each cohort had a separate recess time. Each cohort had a lunch time, even pickup at the end of the day. Each cohort went to a different spot on campus and were picked up, and that really helped a lot. And then probably the third thing, we sat down with the staff and, we're PBIS. And so we developed some specific strategies for lessons that all teachers taught on how kids should wash their hands, how they should use the restrooms, making sure their hands are clean going in, clean coming out. So a lot of those procedures we rehearsed and went over with our kids, and that really helped for that first week of school.
Kevin, just one little follow-up. Do you guys have a lot of busing or?
We do not have busing.
Okay. And I would just.
It is all drop off.
Okay. And I would preempt maybe Melanie and Mary that if you do have a busing situation, maybe you could attack that. So within the question. So Mary?
Yes, in terms of busing, my first group of students that were back on campus are actually my 123 students who live in California within my school district, but attend school in Parker Unified School District in Arizona. And Arizona reopened in early August. So when my students returned to school the last week of July, first week of August in Parker, I had to address the fears and the busing issues in terms of transporting 123 students across state lines to a school district that I had no control over how they were handling their rules and regulations for the pandemic. And that was, I would call that an extreme challenge because my union is a California association. And so I really had to try to get as much information and share with Parker that the needs that I had to make sure that my bus drivers showed up every day to get kids to school. So we worked a lot on that relationship that had ups and downs just based on different attitudes and different governors and different rules. I think in terms of my students, we applied for the elementary waiver as soon as it was available. And it took a couple weeks for us to have the approval to reopen our elementary schools. And I think during that time, it was so essential to really build on my relationship with the Department of Public Health in San Bernardino County. And part of that is that Needles, we are 3.5 hours from San Bernardino, from our county seat. So, and we are 5 minutes from Arizona and 20 minutes from Nevada. So all our sports are in Nevada, and we play middle school, and 50% of my teachers live in Arizona and 10% of my students live in Arizona. So the issues that pertain specifically to our school district that were now regulated by greater agencies that may look different than other parts of the county. So I really had to work on that relationship and identifying the needs and the ability of public health to really track the illness, because when we test in Arizona out here, and those results aren't sent to the San Bernardino County Public Health Department. So the numbers always look good, and the numbers are always not factual data. So in terms of making sure I had data, that I collected it myself, I'm a certified contact tracer because there was no one else out here. So just really figuring out what those needs would be really helped the success of reopening our school and under our waivers, as well as our secondary, as I mentioned. But two, I think the communication was essential, and it was not just communicating the data or the rules, but really addressing the fears of COVID. My community was afraid, my staff were afraid, and I know the impact that had on some of our decisions early on, because some people couldn't get past, but the rules say this, and then the rules would change the next day. So that uncertainty and that lack of like bona fide rules and regulations. School people like rules, they like data, they like hard facts, and that this isn't the world we've been living in since last March. So I think really being open and honest about this is all we know today, and we'll just reopen and do our best, and really addressing that. At first, people were afraid I didn't have all the answers. People would tell me, the board, the city council, well, you're the superintendent, you should know this. And I'm like, well, this is what I do know. So I just used that broken record technique and kept, making what I did know open and available in plans on the website, communicating. And then I think too, making sure that I bought all the stuff that really made people feel like I knew what I was doing, and the district, they've had more confidence in the district with all the PPEs and the, EPGs. And to be honest, I don't know that we really knew what we were doing early on. I mean, we talked earlier about the materials, what you could purchase. It wasn't always the best thing. We made a lot of mistakes, but we bought the stuff that made people feel like by the time we reopened in October, people felt like, okay, I've got this, I'm protected. And I think that's important, because since that time we've had huge spikes in our area. I've had to close schools, and now that we're going to reopen January 11th, and I just picked that date. I threw it out there. I got board support, and so again, I'm restarting that communication of, we've got this, we can do it, we have the stuff, we have the skills, and we know more now than the first time we tried this. So
Great, thank you, Mary. Melanie?
For us, it really just boiled down to communication, and we started that communication in March with the shutdown, and just were very deliberate and elaborate with our communication, which I know our parents appreciated. Something that really went well was that I was the face of, when they first came to campus, I'm the one that's giving the temp check and just kind of overall checking them. The parents really felt very comfortable in that, okay, the superintendent is out there and she's making sure that no one has, any symptoms of illness, so on and so forth. So the communication piece and the fact that I was out in the front every single day, and still am, is very, I think went very well. No one seemed to buck the rules of, you can't get out of your car and all that kind of stuff. Everyone was just great about following every procedure that we had. And we also communicated our safety kind of guidelines and what it looked like in the classroom, and what our custodians used to fog and everything. We distributed those pictures online so that our parents knew, here are the things that our kids are coming into the classrooms. And so they felt really comfortable in knowing that we were doing everything that we could possibly do to keep our kids safe.
Yeah, and I would say, I would echo that with what everybody's saying. It's just, if it boils down to it, is communication and transparency is the biggest thing. And really, I think Mary hit on the head too, is the fact that, we only know what we know. So we're basing our decision on what the current information is. And, one thing that I would say that maybe wasn't mentioned is the fact that people have their own beliefs, and you're not here to change that. You're just here to be transparent about what's going on. And I would agree. So I think that's good. Appreciate that. I'll start with you, Melanie, on this next question. So what did you find that you were not prepared for that surprised you once you opened? Besides everything.
I was not prepared for my teachers to freak out, to be honest with you, because I met with them often, like twice a month. We had Zoom meetings, all that. everyone wanted the kids back in school. But as soon as they got there, they freaked out. They started sending kids to us left and right if they heard a sniffle or a slight cough or whatever. And the next thing I know, I've got, 20 kids in the office the first hour of school. Wait a second, hold on. So I wish that we would have probably kind of planned a little bit better. I didn't realize that that was going to actually happen. But the more time went by, the better it got. The other thing that I was not prepared for were the amount of parents that then decided, oh, I want to send my kid to school now because Joey and Tommy and Mary go to school, and now why can't mine? But now my classes are full and I can't fit any more kids in. So I wasn't prepared for that.
Great, Kevin, what do you think?
Similar to what Melanie had shared, I was not prepared for the division in our staff. We're a fairly cohesive staff together, but I had probably right down the middle, half of my staff felt that kids should not be back at school. And the other half were chomping at the bit to have the kids here. So we would sit in these meetings and, as an administrator, we want to unify our staffs and we want them to come together. And it was extremely challenging to do that. It took a lot of patience and really being a good listener to what everybody was sharing, but then knowing where our board wanted us to go, it was moving forward in that direction. And my board was wonderful in that they said, we're going to make that decision for what we need to do and where we want to go so that you can kind of go out and make it happen. And we know that you're going to have staff, no matter what decision we made, probably had half the staff that were mad and half the staff that were excited about that. Secondly, we thought we had done a great job planning and organizing, but when we had that first kid come in, that they had been a close contact, we were scrambling to figure out what information do we need, what information do we need, what should we be documenting, how can we keep our teachers comfortable that we're listening to them and we're making sure that these kids aren't in class that maybe should be home. And so we began to sit and develop these protocols that really helped us when this happened for the office staff, because quite frankly, our office staff got beat up quite a bit from our teachers because they were working hard to get all the information, help parents, guide parents with the right decision of should we keep your kid home. And so those protocols were really important. Same with our health department. I remember the first time we got on the call and a parent called and said, my kid just tested positive. We probably called that parent back 4 times because we would listen to them, we would call the health department, they would say, well, we need to know this. And so we began to put, again, a protocol together in a form or a template for what questions should you ask. But then it was nice because we faxed that entire form over to the health department. So it really simplified that. And then thirdly, that first letter I had to send out to a classroom that said, we're quarantining your class. Either it was, what's that letter look like? And so, that was probably a good 2 to 3 hour process and just making sure that letter was the way it needed to be. Or for that class that we didn't have to quarantine, but there was still a concern there. And so we spent a lot of time developing those protocols, and we thought how that'll be easy to pull together, and it was not. So, but it certainly was easier after that too. And then if I can add, even with student tracking, those sniffles or the colds, we have been tracking all of those because we've got some kids that they like to go home, or some kids that tend to have a lot of those sniffles. And so we have for every kid kind of a form where we're documenting all of those things going on with them so that we could form a baseline that says, no, this kid doesn't need to go home, or this kid has allergies and things like that. So all of that was helpful and has made life much easier now that it's in place.
I want to add something, if I may. So we initially had said, hey, when a kid has the sniffles or a cough, they can stay home and distance learn. But what I didn't figure in is that the teachers really, at first they were on board, but then they really started to despise that because kids didn't have the materials to be at home if a student had the sniffles. And then they would have to prepare materials for the parent to come and pick up. So it wasn't as easy as, oh, you can just go and stay home and do online learning. It was a bunch of things that the teachers had to prepare for them, which then they started to kind of get a little bit bitter. So we ended up having to work that out and figure that whole process out, but it wasn't as easy as I had anticipated that to be.
Yep, similar here.
Along those lines, I think what really surprised me was how difficult it was to provide a program that really supported our values for equity between students who were in person and distance learning. We had bought we had all the technology. Every family students have 2 laptops, one in school, one at home. They have MiFi, so they had all the stuff. And I think my surprise was how difficult it is for teachers to do in person in the morning and then the distance learning with either an additional group in the afternoon, because we had switched our time for distance learning. We're sort of in a rhythm where kids were coming in the morning and everybody was coming, and I purchased a very structured program, to where an online program before school started, to where it's standard spaced. Every day students are really receiving a quality program. Teachers were on board with it, and that worked really well in distance learning. And then when we reopened to in person, the expectation was, well, we'll just do the same thing. And then in the morning, because we have all this technology in school, and then the students on distance learning in the afternoon, you just do the same thing. And it just became, it's just really difficult to do. I wasn't prepared for that. I hadn't really purchased all the technology that I needed to make that happen. Since I've purchased some type of a recording device, so the teachers will be able to do, our goal is do, excuse me, distance learning in the morning at the same time they're doing the in-person. And to be honest, I don't know how that's going to work. So part of it is just kind of letting go and coming from a focus of, we're going to deal with these hurdles as they come. There's no way we could guess everything that is going to surprise us, everything that's going to be a challenge, or everything that's going to be difficult. And all we can do as a district is look at what is today and how are we doing with it, and then making sure that everybody has that input and to how we can do something better tomorrow. But I just was surprised. I thought, oh, well, equity's not, it's not that difficult. We just do in-person and distance learning, and that just was not true. And that was a big concern that I still have.
Great. Thank you, guys. Appreciate that very much. And Mary, we're going to start with you on the third question. So the question is what efforts did you make to assess either some learning loss and social emotional learning of students, either prior or during the first few weeks of school? And if you did use some data, how did you use that data? And so on and so forth. And then if you did make some adjustments, what were those adjustments? And maybe you might suggest.
Well, as we plan to reopen in person, we, at our elementary level, my school was very anxious to assess students and to the DIBELS, or in the past we had used NWEA, but to have some type of data that really would identify that learning loss, as well as help teachers then plan their instruction moving forward for in-person. And as a committee, we had concerns with the social emotional welfare of students in terms of bringing them back in seat into school after they've been out since March. And then the first thing that we do is assess. So as a superintendent, I did my homework and did a lot of reading in terms of social emotional welfare of students. And then I really got my principals on board that, you know, we're not going to start testing day one. What we're really going to do for a couple weeks is really work on bridging that gap between what students have experienced through storytelling, through reading, class reads, through different type of hands-on activities that may not be as structured as we typically like to do, but that really would support students just getting used to this new world of school. I mean, our kids were in seat for an hour and a half at the elementary, and then we at our secondary, they are there for 2 hours a day. So it was 4 days a week. So it was a challenge to make sure that we effectively use that time. So after students, I would say we did sort of a gradual release model in terms of implementing assessment in. So after a 2-week period, we were able to start some of those assessments so teachers really could learn and understand the learning loss that took place. But to be honest, I think that's something that we're still working on. I think it really helped us to look at attendance from a very aggressive approach in communicating with our parents. I purchased cell phones. I found I could get an old iPhone 7 for $27, and then I was able to have the California CPUC. I wrote a grant and they paid 50% of the monthly service. So that's really improved our teacher home communication. And in part, given our rural area, our phone service is non-existent. It was in many of our classrooms. So our teachers, for teachers to go to the office and try and use one phone in an afternoon to communicate with parents, or to have to use their own cell phones or their own home lines was a challenge. So I would say using the cell phones has really made a difference in how my teachers are communicating with parents and how they're able to meet those attendance requirements. And I think that really helped parents with their own social emotional welfare in terms of connecting to the school. The other thing we really looked at in terms of data was looking at, we started our SARB process in October, and soon as students were back in person, and what we did is we really changed it up. And I think using Zoom really helped. We had the same community individuals, the same district staff, but what we did is we flipped it to more of a how can we help you, how can we support you through this? And we're getting really positive feedback from parents by the questions that we asked during those meetings.
Great, thank you, Mary. Melanie?
During the first week of school, we initiated our first parent conference. And in that parent conference was when we kind of let the parents know, hey, this is how we're going to run school. Here's how you can access your child's grades, and etc. And then the student was also assessed at the same time for any sort of learning loss. So those appointments were about 30 minutes long. And the teacher has an aide in the classroom. And so the aide took the student and the teacher worked with the parent on, letting them know. We really had a great, or as great as we could, program from March to May. Our students really engaged in the instruction. And so we didn't really experience a whole lot of learning loss. However, when we started back, we noticed that our upper grade students, because they were being left home alone at this point, were now not engaging in the work. And so that's just been a little bit tougher for us to just engage them in the instruction and assess, because when they know they're going to be assessed, they don't show up for school that day, right? They don't want to be assessed. And so those kids that we're having trouble with in the assessment process. If they're not already in school, we invite them to school to assess them. We've been assessing them all along, and so we know that a good chunk of our students are still progressing along, which is great. But we do have a chunk of students that are not. Surprisingly, I was thinking that our ELs would be slipping back, but they are not. They're the ones that are, their parents have them on those Zoom lessons every day, and they are participating with us, and we're seeing their rate of growth progress nicely. It's our white population that has actually giving us a little bit of pushback. So that's been interesting data for me to see. But we're communicating that data with our parents. We're communicating that data with the board. The one thing though, my teachers are sticklers on that if you're not participating in school all day, you're in absence. And I'm like, no, that's just been, you know, my teachers want those kids there in school all day. So we'll have some that'll just turn on the camera and then just turn it off and kind of bail out. So that's difficult, but man, we're just not having a huge problem. We do have a couple handfuls of kids that we're not able to assess, but overall our data's looking good. I'd love to share that with anyone that wants to see it, because we're pretty proud of it, and we're proud of the work that we've been doing either in distance learning or in-person learning.
Great, thank you. Kevin?
Yep. And in all transparency, I think for us, assessing learning loss and addressing those needs has been a real struggle for us. Social emotional, we haven't noticed a big difference with our kids from prior. But with the learning loss and the struggles academically, we have really struggled. And one, as assessing those kids with scores that we think are real valid. And part of that has come from, we will have probably 15 to 20 kids absent each day, which has made it difficult for the teachers just to provide that continuity of education in the classroom for all kids, much less try to do some of the RTI interventions that we were used to using in the past. And a lot of that is because our parents have been excellent about, my kid has a cough, they have a cold, I don't want to be that one parent that sends my kid to school and they bring COVID. So our parents have really been over the top in being careful about that. So, and then when we're on hybrid, we use iRady for a lot of our math and reading. A lot of that was happening at home, so we weren't sure if those results were as accurate. And so we've really struggled with that. So I'm really looking for other ideas from even this group on ways that we can approach that. And I will say that I think just now we're feeling like we're getting our feet under ourselves as far as what the schedule is and what it looks like and the routines. So we're hoping in January we're going to tackle this and do a little better job of helping our kids.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Everybody, I would just say, just from a high school district perspective, you know, we have 9 feeder school districts that feed into us, and we never even thought about or realized that all of our freshmen have never seen our teachers before. So they were zooming in or doing some things that they chose distance learning, and they're just like, this was their first meeting. I mean, you could hardly, you know, normally we'll have a link situation where we meet and everything like that too, and they get to know the teachers and stuff, and we never even thought of that. Was the fact that they're going to a new school and have new people that are trying to teach them and work with them that they really have no relationship with or haven't met or anything like that. So I would say that was an interesting one that we never thought about. So I don't know, Margie, we're getting close to our 30-minute thing. If you wanted to kind of take do the drawing and stuff right now, or if you wanted to go tackle one more question and get a little closer as far as that goes. So I'm not sure what your thoughts are on that.
I think we're okay to tackle one more question.
Okay, great.
And then we can move into the raffle.
Great, Kevin, I'll come back to you for this this question here. Is what about subs? Subs is an issue.
Yes,
you know, do you notice with any issues with subs, and how did you overcome some of those?
Yeah. We've actually been pretty fortunate. We did hire one of our regular subs full-time. We gave her the long-term sub rate, And so she's here every single day, which has been nice, because if a teacher, we had one teacher that her child had several symptoms, ended up testing negative, but she had to stay home. So the sub was able to jump in and take over that class. And so that sub has been available to fill in for teachers. But if we've had some others out, if there's more than one out, then I'm either covering or our RSP teacher is covering, because we just cannot get subs to come in. And so that's how we've addressed that. We did go out and up for this year only our long-term sub pay and our regular sub pay, but that has not encouraged anyone to really step up, and because a lot of our regular subs don't want to be in the classroom, they're staying home, and they're afraid to be here. So we continue to struggle with that.
I have a feeling that the next two answers are going to be similar. But I'm not clairvoyant or anything, but I'm just assuming. So, Mary?
Yes, there's a problem with sub and distance learning. Because even if I have teachers on distance learning who at the beginning of them would say, oh, I'll just take, my grade level partner's class. And then afterwards, the principal would call and say, they have 55 students on a Zoom meeting. That's just, I go, okay, that's not working. So we really worked with the union to come up with ways that, how would we compensate teachers for specific numbers of students, even in the distance learning part? So we negotiated that, we did an MOU, that worked well. And then in the in-person, our issue, we were good up until people started getting ill. So that was one of the reasons at Thanksgiving that we closed for to really do a thorough cleaning of our school just for those 3 days. And then we did not have enough teachers who were not exposed or not ill with COVID to reopen after Thanksgiving. And that's where, as I talked about that, addressing the fears after, I think that challenge and then not having a sub pool. I had 2 subs that suddenly then decided to move to Phoenix and are not returning like after this week. They were in long-term assignments. So, luckily this week we hired 2 more subs, but it's just a constant battle and it's a challenge. So I was very fortunate when over the summer, just kind of predicting how this was going to play out, that I overstaffed at my elementary, thinking that if I needed to, because our rules are 1 teacher, 1 cohort, one teacher per day. So if I can't have teachers come in and out, then if I have lower class size, then I can assign students for that day to be with that teacher. So that seemed to get us through until these recent spikes. So now we'll see.
Great, thank you, Mary. Melanie?
We do a couple of different things. It just kind of depends on if the teacher is really ill and has, we have no subs also. I'll just be, it's just been a nightmare. Anyway, we have sub and most of the time he can't sub, so we typically have 0 subs. But what we have been successful with is we have an aide in every single classroom. So most of the time up until just this last week, if the teacher needed to be out or needed to be quarantined or whatever, the aide would be able to run the class from inside the classroom while the teacher is zooming in. So the teacher of record is still, teaching while the aide is monitoring the students. And if we have that situation where the teacher is unable to do that, if I'm able to cover the class, I will, but if not, I ask the teacher to message the parents, then we do asynchronous learning for that day. I hate to do that, and we've only had to do that once. But it is the times that we're in right now. I, as the superintendent, principal, head nurse, counselor, all those things that we do, right? When we're a single school district, you just kind of stretch yourself very thin. So having that asynchronous option for at least the day until we can kind of scramble and figure something out has been successful for us.
I think you forgot to add a dedicated sub to that list too that you just mentioned. So.
And janitor, because I've had to be that too.
Perfect. So this is a time when we're going to take a little pause here. I'm going to introduce Kyle McKibben with Keenan. And Kyle, if you could explain the raffle and the prizes would be great. Maybe introduce yourself.
Yes, absolutely. My name is Kyle McKibben. I'm with Keenan and Associates. And if you're not familiar with Keenan, we are in California working with public school districts up and down the state, from workers' compensation to employee benefits to property and liability. And I'm very fortunate to be on this call and hearing what you all are doing on a day-to-day basis. And I really want to thank you all for what you do for your communities, because it is absolutely tremendous in light of what we are being faced with, especially for all of you on a day-to-day basis. So just unbelievable and just incredible. So thank you for what you do for your communities on a day-to-day basis. And we do have, I believe, two $50 raffle or two $50 gift certificates in the raffle for today. So I believe that those will be raffled at this time.
Yeah, Josh, I think we have a little way to raffle these. Is that right?
We do. Josh is going to pull up our ACSA raffle wheel.
That's pretty cool.
All right, congratulations, Kathy. Let's run it again there, Josh. I think we have two winners.
Thank you.
All right, that was quite something. Congratulations to the winners, and congratulations, thanks, Kyle, for sponsoring that and introducing yourself too. I appreciate
Absolutely.
that. So we, I think we've come to the portion now where we're going to have an open mic and Q&A. What we're asking people to do, and Josh, you can correct me if you need to, but I think we're just asking people to kind of unmute themselves and ask your question. If you'd like to direct it to one of the three panelists, that would be preferred, or you can just kind of throw it out there and then I might be able to assist in who needs to answer. That's part of the reason why we had them introduce themselves and say what size their districts and where they are and things like that too. So I would open it up to anybody that might want to do that. Don't all unmute at the same time, if you would, please. Okay, well, I have some more questions. Then maybe I can get it rolling a little bit here. I don't know. I think everybody's just nervous about going past that raffle way. We just did that with the wheel, so I think that was a little intimidating there how well that worked. So I would just throw out there, Kevin and Mary and Melanie. We'll start with you, Melanie. As now that we're at this point and you've gone to this point, is there anything that you could glowingly do something differently? And then, obviously we wouldn't even be here, right, if you could do it differently. But there's something maybe glowingly that you might want to pass on that you would just do differently.
I would quit first.
Yeah.
Someone else take over. So let's just
retire. No.
This is a rough job right now. And I know that a couple of my Tulare County colleagues are here today and we've commiserated with each other. Honestly, I mean, if you don't have a go-to person or people that you can share things with, that you can, like I know that I created some things early on that I was able to share with my colleagues, and they've been able to share some things with me, which kind of make the workload a little bit lighter, right? I think I was hearing something about Kern County in the very beginning, that their superintendents kind of divided up the workload of different things they needed to do so that not everyone was working on the same wheel, right? Everybody's working on different wheels and they all share that together. I wish that our county would have gone that route, but we have a strong enough, kind of team of small schools that we were able to do that among each other, which was nice.
Very good. Anybody else? Mary or Kevin?
I'd like to add that the one thing that I really didn't think about in any of this, the planning, the communication, was that I would get sick. I am a COVID survivor. I am in week 3. And what happened was when people heard that I had COVID, the woman who wears their mask makes everybody stay 6 feet or more away. The rule, it caused a lot of havoc because people didn't think that I could get this. And if I could get this, then anybody could get this. And what the thought that I hadn't put in is that in a small school district, I have 1,000 students. I mean, I wear a lot of hats. I really work to be inclusive and I have a wonderfully supportive management team. But when you're still the superintendent and you're the ultimate person responsible and you're ill, I hadn't planned on that. And so I really, at the beginning, had to sit down and say, how am I going to get my district through it? Because what would that look like? I had people asking me, like, well, what does that mean? Are you quitting? Are you coming back? Are you retiring? I'm like, nope, we've got this and I'm just working from home. Lucky me. So I really had to work on that data communication, on even working with my board as superintendent. They were like, well, what does this mean? Are you not the superintendent anymore? Are you? So I had to go through my contract. I had to show, no, I'm the superintendent. I just don't feel so good right now. And the other part was this illness. You really don't know what it's going to be like tomorrow. So I had to be really open and honest with people, like, this afternoon is not a really good time because I just don't feel like I'm thinking clearly. So we could reschedule that. So I found that people were, the more honest and transparent I was, first, they thought I could get through it, which I did. And my whole family had it all at the same time. But it also gave confidence that the district, you know what, we've got this. I go, it just might look a little different today, but all the rules are the same, all the work is the same. And when I had time, when I felt good, I would get the work done and make sure people knew that what was happening. And I think that really helped us get to a place that now I have a lot of people right now for the size of our community who are sick or ill, and they're texting me like late at night, what do I do? I'm like, okay, I know what to tell you to do. I know about I'm not that kind of doctor, but I know personally what worked for me, and I think that transparent communication is what really will help us get through this. And I've already set the date for reopening schools because it was important that people know that January 11th, we're going to be back in person. I mean, this is going to happen. We're going to make it happen. And it helps with that fear factor. That fear factor is what stops people from moving forward. And I think we're in a really good place that we've really dealt with that.
And I would chime in, I particularly echo what Melanie said. It has probably been the most stressful and difficult time of my career. I can't think of any other time that's been so difficult. And had a teacher come in who has struggled the most with being here and with COVID and actually working. When she sat down and she says, Kevin, I don't know how you do it, because no matter what decision you make, someone is happy, someone is mad. And it's so stressful. And I have to be honest, I hated staff meetings, because I would go into these staff meetings and the vocal ones who didn't want to be here were the ones who dominated the conversation. And I wanted to say, hey, those of you who want to be here, say something, but they wouldn't. and I began to dread staff meetings. However, what we kind of did to help with that is we did form a staff COVID committee where each of our union groups could select representatives to be there. And what we began to say is, if you have concerns, share it with your representative, because then that committee came together and we talked about confidentiality with that committee. And my commitment to them was, you ask anything, I'll give you all of the information you need, as far as why is this student still here, or why is this student not here? And that helped a lot. But even more importantly, I think, is your school culture, and trying to make sure that you keep that school culture going in a positive way. And we didn't do that right at the beginning. For example, every Friday morning we do a Friday flag, where all of our students would come out front around the flag. We did weather, we did announcements, we did the flag salute. And we didn't do that the first couple months. And then we finally said, wait a minute, we need to get this culture going. So now our 8th grade class does Friday flag, and we Zoom it, because we don't want to mix the cohorts. We've gotten our student council going again. With staff, we're making sure that we do things during staff meeting. In fact, Josh, I love that wheel. I'm thinking I need that wheel, because I could see such a benefit of doing that school-wide with all of our kids and all of our staff. And so those are the things that I think we did not tackle. And if we had done that at the beginning, I think it would have helped us. I think we still would have had our struggles, but it would have brought us along as a staff a little bit better. And then I'll finish, one other little piece is that things really kind of turned around 2 weeks ago for us. And it goes to the culture piece. We did the week after Thanksgiving, we did distance learning. And we did that because we wanted a week just to make sure that things had settled down, and it would address anyone who might be sick. And we're glad we did that, because we did have a couple kids that if they had been here, we would have had to have quarantined their classes. But our staff did full-on distance learning during that week, and teachers were in the classrooms helping each other. The ideas that were getting shared, because it was, I mean, we did a lousy job with distance learning last year, and this was their first time really doing it well. And the excitement from staff that built from them helping each other and sharing with ideas really created this excitement in campus, and it began to shift things around where it's really quite nice right now, even though we're still struggling with things. So I think culture, don't let culture fall off the plate. Find any way you can to keep it going for your kids and your staff.
I want to echo that really quick, because I kind of missed the mark on that the first couple of weeks of school. And we normally do a spirit circle every Friday where the whole school kind of gets together and we celebrate birthdays and accomplishments and do some, student shout outs and things like that. The kids were missing that. So we still do it in person and online at the same time. And then when we're done with the in-person piece and we just have the kiddos that are still online, we do some special celebrations and some special shout outs, and they need that time to tell you what special things are going on in their life, or if they aced the test this week, or if they, got a higher score than they did the previous week on something or whatever. I noticed that they really wanted to keep those traditions and those things that we always do if we're in school alive, even if it's through Zoom.
Yeah, I would just echo every single one of those comments, and I would add the fact that I think we as superintendents can't do our job if we're not healthy either. And so I think you've got to make sure you're in the right spot and in the right place. Not to be corny, but you really need to figure out what your why is in this whole situation. And I think if you just lead from what's best for students, as we always do, I think that'll always win. One thing that I really pushed on this whole situation and pandemic was really to get the board involved and make it a board decision as opposed to us, because this type of a situation could really be a career-ending decision if you don't, as far as that goes. Not to be gloom and doom, obviously, but I think the more you can share that responsibility, the better I think it becomes. Because because let's face it, that's an elected body that's designed to make those decisions. But going back, I would just say that it's, I find I find it more important than ever to make sure you take care of yourself. Because if you don't, it's kind of like we tell parents, right? If you're not an advocate for your own kid, nobody else will be. So I would say the same thing for yourself. You need to take the time to do what you need to do to keep your center and everything like that too, so you can make good rational decisions. Because I think that's an easy place to go. Like what Mary's point is you just never thought she would get sick, right? So we have to think about those things. And the more we run ourselves ragged, the more susceptible we are to getting that. And I don't feel like we can make these decisions we need to make on point if we're not taking care of ourselves. So, I think this is really digging deep and making sure you're taking care of yourself for that. I love the idea of what Melanie said about how she kind of got her fellow superintendents together as almost like a support group. So I think that's a great idea. And I would say lean on each other during these times, whether you're in, our part of the state or Mary's part of the state or where we're at. I think one thing about technology right now is everybody's right next door, basically, right, or within a call. So don't try to do it alone. Try to get people that can help you with that. So anybody has any questions or anything like that too, and I think we've had prepared, if it does go a little bit over 5, we are willing to stay till about 5:15 for that. So I can think of probably more questions, but I would prefer to get from the group would be better. So please unmute yourself and fire away if you have it.
I have a question about how are you addressing grades, students that are not necessarily doing the work or coming online and then teachers having to give a grade. How are you handling and managing that?
Anyone? Melanie?
For us, it really boils down to what they're giving us. They get the grade of the effort that they've put in, of the assignments that they've put in. We're grading as we would in a school year. We didn't during the first shutdown, right? Because everyone was like, no, it's a credit, no credit, all that kind of stuff. But when we got the go ahead for full grades, they are getting full grades. We gave parents access to our grade book so that they can check at any time. They all have Google Classroom, so they all get the updates of what's due, of what's been, corrected and all that kind of stuff. But unfortunately, we have some kids that are not getting the best grades. But we've documented a lot that we've, of everything that we've done to communicate with the parents, because that's another piece. I told my staff that you don't want to meet with parents at conference time or come up with a report card and not have one shred of communication with the parents that, this is where their child's grade is headed, or, this is where it's at now. So that was a huge thing for us. We have most of our kids participating and getting decent and great grades. We only have a handful that are not, but we have documentation that we've communicated all that all along with the parents. That's important.
And we are the same.
And one of our greatest concerns are for our seniors. We have students who had been A students up until last spring, and now for whatever reason are out of touch with school, and we're using all of our attendance practices to really connect, but it's been a challenge. And so we have a grading task force that will bring recommendations to the board for our second semester, which will be our board meeting January 19th. And we're looking at things like changing what an F is. And this would be district-wide. So looking, instead of an F being 0 to 55%, we're looking at narrowing it down like 50 to 55%, because we're trying to find opportunities to where a student can mitigate their learning loss and increase their effort, and then that impacts their grades. We're also looking at credit recovery programs for our our high school students, as well as our middle school, our 8th grade students transitioning to high school. So one of the things we're looking at is for the second semester, eliminating our elective periods for some of our students and assessing students that need that extra support in core academic areas, either through tutoring or through credit recovery, and providing that opportunity for our secondary students to really be able to take those courses that they may not have been so successful. So we're also looking to see what everybody else is doing. You know, so our task force is led by our high school principal. And again, our largest concern, our greatest concern is we have a very high graduation rate because we really go after every single senior every year out of a graduating class of 56 to figure out what will it take to support that student graduating. And at this point in time, we have quite a few that have been disconnected and have dropped off. And our issue out here is when they drop out, a lot of kids move to Arizona and it's very hard to find people. So we're trying to mitigate that before that happens, second semester, and trying to make that difference. So.
Yeah, great. So I would say that if you have questions, if you put questions in the chat box, also if you would, if you wouldn't mind saying those, that would, because I'm not sure everybody's seeing the chat and things like that too. So if you have something written in the chat and you don't mind asking the question verbally, would be helpful. Melanie had to get off, so now we're just down to Kevin and Mary, but they're both a wealth of knowledge, so I don't think that's going to be lowering anything. So let's have, if we have anybody that can do that. I've seen a couple questions. If you guys want to unmute yourself and mention some of them, would be great. Or even comments are fine too. It doesn't necessarily have to be a question. It could be comments.
I have another question if no one
Sure.
else has one.
You bet.
How are you handling, or what are ways that you are able to reach out to those families that are basically MIA, have not come online, for those that are online, are not coming to school, for those that are doing the hybrid? How are you, or what are ways that you're reaching out to those families that are not showing up?
Great question. Kevin, you want to start that?
Sure. It's a lot of phone calls, a lot of emails. We normally have high involvement. 70% of our students are inter-district here, but this year, interestingly enough, I can think of 3 students right now that we are really struggling with. Shasta County has a great program in place to where we can make referrals, and folks from social services and also the County Office of Ed are reaching out and making connections with those families. We're reaching out, I've made many phone calls to those to say, what can we do to support you? We do have a home study program that we put together just for those who are worried about their kids being here at school, and we've been able to offer that to them as well. But we have had a couple families that just, I think the stress of COVID, I don't really think they're taking advantage of it, but they have just checked out. And so we continue to reach out to them and encourage them and try to get them involved. And one family, we had to get just a little bit ornery with them, you know, because they just refused to even communicate back. So thank goodness for the county and their help. And
Mary?
I think yesterday, one of my assistant principals and 2 of my principals used a district car and took 30 different families, just some information and sort of some positive type, I wouldn't say rewards or awards, but these were 30 of our families that were most challenging right now in terms of coming to school. So, and they took pictures, you know, socially distanced, but they took pictures with the students and they had like a little goodie for them. And I think, as has been said, I think it's about that connection and that communication and that homeschool relationship. And I asked yesterday, I said, so what do you think this will improve these students doing their assignments, signing on to our distance learning, showing up and connecting to school. And the principals really felt that they were so well received, I think, in the majority of the homes. And they didn't go inside, they just did sort of a drive-by, but they have been doing something similar over the last couple of weeks, and they felt that we're going to monitor how those students do in terms of attendance, and we'll collect data and see if it makes a difference. But I do think it certainly makes a difference in that relationship.
I would say that we've taken we have one of our schools that got some CSI money that we were using, as well as some of our COVID monies, to hire some social workers to go do some visits to find out what some of the issues are that maybe people might be having, whether it's, who knows, domestic issues or anything like that too, that we just to give a check-in, because we do have a fair amount of population that are choosing to do distance learning, and we're just not hearing anything from them. So, we're not really sending a welfare check per se, but we are sending out there just to see everything's going on. Do they have the equipment? Do they need anything? Anything like that too. And it's really, we're trying to be as least amount of intrusive as possible, and then to be able to do that, to be able to make connection. But I agree with both Mary and Kevin, is just communication's been the biggest thing, just communicating with them, trying to reach out. And I think people are, and then being able to try to problem solve to figure out what you can do. Is there any barriers that we can remove such that you can make progress? So anything else? I know we're getting close to time here, but anything else or any other topics you would like to discuss or anything? Or Mary or Kevin, a kind of an open-ended thing, if you have anything maybe you're thinking of that you haven't thought of or you'd like to convey?
I think in a small school district, I think the role of the school district is such an essential part of the community. And I think that the confidence that a community has in their school system, the fact that no matter what the issues are that come up, they expect the school to be able to deal with it. And I think that we've been very fortunate to really share that how we connect to the community, that they can be confident that we're going to work on answers. It isn't that we have the answers, but we're going to look for stakeholder input. We're going to ask opinions. We're going to, if we make a decision and it's not the right decision, there's confidence they have in us that we'll talk about it and look for something better. And I think knowing that has really helped us to understand the role of a school district within something as serious as a pandemic. How does the community and the school district really function during these times? So I think that's been eye-opening for me.
And I would just, again, reach out to your peers, reach out to us. If you just need a sounding board or someone to talk to, again, don't do it on your own. We're here. We've all learned a lot of different lessons, so we can learn from each other, and happy to share any resources or things that we have put together with anyone who would like that. So take advantage of all of the resources that ACSA has to offer, and that the Small School District Association and all of us have to share with one another.
Yeah, I would just say thank you to the panelists also, Kevin and Mary and Melanie. I appreciate you guys' time and your insight on all this. Also, Kyle with Keenan, we really appreciate your sponsorship in this and your participation. ACSA Member Services and Margie, it's been great. Thank you very much. And then ACSA IT Support and Josh, we appreciate everything, and we appreciate everybody showing up and listening. And like Kevin and I would think Mary would say, is just, you're not alone here. Reach out if you need help. So for that. So thanks everyone. Have a wonderful holiday season coming up, and enjoy the rest of your night.